Welcome. So welcome, everybody. Welcome people who were able to make it in person today, and welcome everybody on Zoom. So for a whole day of feminist movements across geographies, it's organized by our wonderful postdoctoral fellow at the Social Justice Center, Bermal Küçük. So I will leave her to say a few introductory words, and then we will start with the first talk of Niloofar Golkar, another postdoc at the Social Justice Center. So it's a treat for us today. Thank you all for being here.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. I really would like to thank you all for being here and taking the time to participate in this event. I am Bermal. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at Social Justice Center at Concordia. I am so happy to organize this event because bringing diverse feminist movement into dialogue has long been my inspiration. So I really want to thank the Social Justice Center for providing me with this opportunity. More specifically, I would like to thank Christian, the coordinator of the center. Christian puts a lot of time and effort into coordinating and organizing this event. And I would also thank to Bengi, co-director of the center. Bengi also opened all the door for me, and she also mobilized her networks for me. And I also I would also like to thank the Center for Research in Ethics at McGill University and Social Justice Center at Simone de Beauvoir Institute at Concordia University for their collaboration. It means a lot to me to be supported by these two wonderful institutions. So today, friends, we will talk about feminist movements across geographies, including Turkey, Argentina, India, Iran, and Quebec. I would like to say a few words about why I want to organize this event. Well, since the last decade, as transnational feminist activists and scholars, we have increasingly converged around a shared concern. It is the rise of anti-gender backlash. So we are trying to understand this backlash and its relation to the system of other system of oppression and exploitation, including, for example, heteropatriarchal capitalism, colonialism, imperialism, and racism. So for sure, the most important reason for this backlash has been the enormous achievement of feminist movement, especially over the last 2 decades. The key achievement, for me at least, has been the expansion of feminism beyond narrow political circles into a broader social base. With this expansion, feminism began to transform the grammar of patriarchal relations and language. It exposed the long-standing patriarchal consensus, unsettled normative expectations and imaginaries, removed violence from being an acceptable practice, dismantled the established cultural and political patriarchal codes, and transformed the ways we relate to ourselves and to others. The most concrete indicator of this feminist rise was the cycle of feminist mobilization that intensified between 2015 and 2020. So what happened during that period? In 2015, the Ni Una Menos movement emerged in Argentina in response to femicide and soon resonated across the entire Latin America. In 2016, women in Poland launched the Black protest against the ban on abortion. In 2017, activists from Nu Ino Menos and the Black protest in Poland, they together called for an international feminist strike. And about 50, their call resonated in more than 50 countries. And Spain had been one of those countries which responded most strongly to this call by launching the 8M movement. In the United States, we saw the mass anti-Trump protest against abortion restriction in 2017, and this followed by the Me Too movement, which again resonated many countries. In 2019, the last thesis protest against rape culture emerged in Chile and quickly spread across the world. So we also witnessed the Green Tide movement in Argentina, again mobilized for abortion rights. In Iran, we witnessed the White Wednesday campaign and the mass protest following the death of Mahsa Amini. In Romania, the One Falls, We All Fall campaign against femicide. In India, mass protest against gang rape and mobilization for abortion rights. In Turkey, we organized incredibly large feminist night marches alongside the participation in transnational actions such as Feminist Strike, Last Thesis protest, and Me Too movement. Yet, in the past 5 years, we have entered a more intensified phase of oppressive atmosphere. In this new phase, the level of violence has intensified. We began to experience capital's exploitation and poverty more deeply. The conditions for the reproduction of life have increasingly eroded. Accumulation has reorganized around the war, as we see in Iran, and for sure in many other countries, such that we began to openly name this system as fascism. In this workshop, friends, we will try to understand how feminist movements are navigate such a context. We will try to find answers based on from different countries, and for sure, we are dealing with countries that differ significantly from each other, from one another, politically and economically, and each country has its own layered, complex dynamics, rhythms, and historical background. And for sure, it is very difficult to address all of these complexities and nuances and long historical background in a single presentation. At the same time, however, we also need this kind of broader frameworks to recognize the patterns and share experiences. So friends, I hope this event help us to explore the convergences and divergences across different countries. Thank you again for joining us. So friends, we will start with Iranian feminist movement. Iranian women are waging an incredible struggle, and their struggle has been a source of strength for all of us. Speaking for the feminist movement in Turkey, I would say that we follow the struggle of Iranian women very closely and take a strength from it. But unfortunately, friends, our sister in Iran, and of course the Iranian people, are under attack. After facing the attacks of their own governments, they are now under attacks of these colonial states and these imperialist war machines. I would like to try to discuss, we will try to discuss the Iranian feminist movement under this, condition of war. And Niloofar will talk about Iranian feminism. I would like to briefly introduce Niloofar. Niloofar Golkar is a Berry Pashak Postdoctoral Fellow at Social Justice Center at Concordia University. She's an activist, researcher, and writer who received her PhD from the Department of Politics at York University. Her postdoctoral research explores alternative economic pathways to social justice through an interdisciplinary lens grounded in indigenous sovereignty, common cooperatives, and theories of anti-capitalism. She is a research coordinator with Research for the Frontlines. She is also contributed to feminist movement in Iran as a member of We Change and the Feminist for Jina networks. Now I would like to give the floor to Niloofar.
Thank you, Bermal. It was very nice to hear you.
Record?
Yes, it's recording.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm just taking a bit.
Thank you, Bermal, for the introduction, and thank you to you all for being here. And thanks to the Center for organizing this timely workshop. It's under very hard circumstances that I'm giving this talk. It would have been very different a few weeks ago. So, to survive the horrifying events of 2026, including the horrendous bloodshed and massacre of thousands of protesters in January by the regime, and the current war on Iran by the US and Israel, where bombs are also falling on non-military targets, people's homes, schools, health centers, and the critical infrastructure of everyday life. My feminist network has become a place of refuge. It is where people have not fallen into the simplistic reactionary politics of either the pro-war parades we've likely seen in the diaspora, nor the pro-Islamic regime stance of campists and the so-called resistance. What we say is, we refuse to choose between our murderers, the Islamic Republic of Iran, Israel, and the US. Because many of us involved in the feminist movement come from a long history of resistance by women and queer people before us, who have kept building and opening up spaces under oppression through the Iran-Iraq War, the mass executions of political prisoners in Iran in the 80s, and decades after. Here I try to explain this history in a glimpse. My hope is to ground the position above that many of us reached together after hours and hours of discussion in the past few weeks. In this talk, I explain some of the processes through which feminists in Iran have created a constant, evolving, and expanding space to gain rights, freedom, and dignity. The essential ingredients of democracy that is rooted in community and conscious political activism. They have done so within the context of an authoritarian state, while facing criminalization and by continuously pushing the legal, cultural, political, and economic boundaries. The feminist movement in Iran has been active for more than 100 years, going through many phases. Here I begin by offering a glimpse of this movement after the 1979 revolution, 2000s, the 1 million signature campaign to change discriminatory laws against women, the time that I was in Iran and active in the movement, and from 2022 onward. It aligns with the Jiyan Azadi, or Woman Life Freedom. My presentation not going to be linear. I'm going to jump back and forth between current situation and between these historical events, important feminist events that have happened in Iran to ground our current position in the historical resistance. Women were important participants in the 1970s, serving as members of socialist and communist organizations, trade unions, and as workers and employees such as nurses and teachers. Some were part of nationalist front organizations, and others were within those who have Islamic tendencies. However, when a very exoteric tendency of the Islamist movement, led by Khomeini's Velayat Faqih ideology, took over the political power, the new regime's first move were to dismantle the laws and apparatus that women had gained before, and also to crush the democratic space that was opened after revolution. Two main groups publicly opposed Khomeini, women and Kurdish parties. You can listen to Donya Zia's on the Stolen Revolution, Iranian Women of 1979, and read Rojin Mokarian, Forgotten History, Kurdistan's Brief Freedom, 1979, and the year Khomeini ended it. Women saw that the new regime is starting to attack democratic rights and fundamental rights of women to life and dignity and equality, and against that women achieved prior to revolution was also under attack. These gains had helped them gain better status, education, social services, and jobs, including favorable family laws and freedom of dress. Khomeini emphasized imposing the forced hijab to change the Taghuti culture, which means worshiping anyone or anything other than God in Islamic terminology, to Islamic culture. These attacks on women's rights, including limiting the jobs women could partake in, imposing the forced hijab, and creating a Sharia law system to suspend and replace previous family laws that had been gained through the women's movement. Women organized large demonstrations on streets of Tehran to oppose these changes, mainly led by teachers, nurses, and leftist women. Working women especially were overwhelmingly among the organizers of these mass demonstrations because they saw the forced hijab as a limiting factor in their workplaces. This included women who lost their jobs due to the ban on women working in specific fields, or who were moved around in institutions such as army and police. To enforce the forced hijab, the newly established state imposed a significant volume of state-sanctioned violence by paramilitary forces named Basij and police in public, resulting in daily systemic violence against women on the streets for not covering enough. And this wasn't just for the first phase of the revolution, it almost stayed up to now. And in 2022, when Jina Amini was murdered because she got arrested by this morality police on streets for so-called not covering her enough, started the Jinjian Azadi revolution. The forced hijab was a performance of ideological allegiance to the new order, an anti-democratic public performative law that was supposed to send the signal to outsiders that everyone is in agreement with the Velayat Faqih. Established random police checkpoints, initially used to impose the hijab, were soon used to search and identify others. The new regime started going after leftist, liberal nationalist intellectuals, students and professors who were not aligned with the Khomeini's ideology. They were expelled through a cultural revolution from universities. Subsequently, many were imprisoned and ended in mass executions of political prisoners in the 80s in Iran, or they became exiles. During the same period, Kurdish movement also opposed Khomeini's authoritarian approach and were practicing community-based forms of decision-making in Kurdistan that faced extreme military attack by the regime that included killing, imprisonment, and execution of thousands there. But why this history is important today, especially in this period? Because feminists and leftists, and also newly formed coalition of Kurdish parties, are under attack from two main camps, beside Islamic Republic, obviously. The campists that align themselves with Islamic Republic regime against imperialist forces of US and Israel, and right-wing monarchist tendencies that are pushing forward an anti-intellectual, anti-leftist, anti-feminist form of totalitarianism in the name of unity. As a result of campist tendencies and those who view the authoritarian regime as savior, resisting Israeli genocide, the main anti-war movement refuses to break ties with Islamofascist supporters and agents of Islamic Republic. This creates intolerable scenes for many Iranians who oppose both the war and the regime, a regime that even under war condition is arresting people, fast-tracking executions, and threatening citizens, on the streets with gunshots. They have set up countless checkpoints to impose extra security measures while providing zero war relief. There are no shelters, no to provide vital needs like medication and food, and only tightening security and severed communication lines, such as phones, internet, and so on. The situation for Iranians who oppose both sides is incredibly complicated. We know very well that the Islamic Republic turns on its own people whenever it faces a foreign threat. When the US killed Soleimani, the regime shut down the Ukrainian passenger plane, killing mostly Iranians, many from Canada. When Israel attacked Iran and waged 12-day war, many of us feared that they would exact revenge on ordinary Iranians, which they did during the January uprising. Within 2 days, they massacred thousands. At least 8,000 deaths are being verified by human rights organizations, with over 11,000 more under investigation. We will never know the exact numbers. To be honest, people are terrified now. Many fear that when this war ends, there will be mass executions again and again. So I understand those inside Iran who support the war. I have no criticism for them. They are in an impossible situation, caught between a murderous regime and the bombs. There are many messages and stories from people who, coming from Iran, from people who oppose the war, because they see value in resistance, but when there is no life left, there is no alternative or resistance either. However, in the diaspora, we see the formation of another authoritarian movement posing as alternative to the Islamic regime. This has created obscene scenes of pro-Trump, pro-Netanyahu crowds dancing in celebration as bombs fall on cities, indiscriminately killing people, children, and ruining critical infrastructure vital for everyday life. When we oppose their view, in best case scenario, we are usually met with the question, what is your alternative? Why Reza Pahlavi, who supports this war, is posed as the only option. We as feminists oppose this. We have seen it before. When a patriarchal man takes over a revolution and co-opts it with his totalitarian ideology, we lose. Pahlavi wants power so badly that he offers condolences to American soldiers killed by Iranian missiles, but remains silent on the families of 170 school children killed by US-Israeli bombs on a school. He became enraged by a coalition of 5 Kurdish parties, accusing them of separatism and threatening to attack them with his imaginary army once he takes over the power. The same person stayed silent when Trump suggests the map of Iran might change after this war, or that he would ruin this country's infrastructure to the point it could never be rebuilt. In a recent interview, he claimed the US would profit $1 trillion if he gained power, without addressing whether the people living in Iran would ever regain their lives, economy, and dignity. Many of us feminists say we have seen this before, when Khomeini was presented as the only alternative during the revolution. The social and political groups who did not buy the rhetoric from the start became the constant target of security measures. Now, I will move to the next phase, which is in 2000s. I will give another historical example to ground our no war, no dictatorship position. In 2000s, after passing through the 90s, a decade where social movements in Iran needed time to rebuild and come out of the extreme oppression of the 80s, the 1 million signature campaign to change discriminatory laws against women began. The campaign started after the first year of Mahmoud Ahmadinejad's presidency. Ahmadinejad represented a new brand of conservatism matched with nationalism that enforced the militarization of the economy under the banner of privatization. Religious fundamentalism, nationalism, and the militarization of the economy are all known threats to women's status and rights. but the movement had been brewing underground for a while. In women's centers, homes, reading groups, universities. However, in early years of 2000, women movements started having growing public presence, mostly organizing around equal rights against stoning and sexual violence. So on June 12, 2006, during the height of the women organizing in Tehran, a feminist protest was organized, drawing one of the largest crowds seen in Tehran for women's rights. Something unprecedented happened. Several police buses arrived and a large number of female officers, wearing chadors and carrying buttons, got out. For the first time, we who were active in the feminist movement encountered female police officers acting as field enforcers, actively engaged in violence and arresting women's rights activists. It felt as though the authoritarian state was mocking the demand for equality by deploying militarized female forces to uphold the existing power hierarchy. Around 100 people got arrested that day. A few months later, on August 27, 2006, We Change campaign against discriminatory laws began. A panel was organized in RAD Institute entitled The Effect of Laws on Women's Lives. However, security forces were there and closed the doors as people were gathering to go inside the sala. As the result, the campaign started outside on the streets and through face-to-face conversations, attesting to its true nature and rocky beginnings. The campaign method was to target 10 discriminatory laws against women that were mostly part of family laws. Campaign members started a multi-layer, multi-space form of activism that slowly but effectively grew. The face-to-face discussions took place space for feminist debate on issues of women's rights, equality, freedom, and dignity. Through street, face-to-face debates that happen in any public space, from public transportation to parks, universities, and workplaces, activists deepened their understanding of social issues that led to writing that were published on We Change website, on Herland's online feminist journal. The results of the debates were also discussed in meetings, revealing, analyzing, and challenging oppressive layers that allowed these laws to be practiced. Through learning the social processes and layers of oppression, the campaign participants, who were growing fast all over Iran in different cities and regions, could create a culture of resistance that went beyond immediate campaign targets. In other words, through extensive street activities, community and movement building, our activities were breaking lines between tradition, patriarchy, politics, and economy, and debating them as interrelated relations and systems, such as connecting women's oppression to the political and economic realm, which is not separated from reproductive and subsistence work that supposedly happen in the private sphere of the home and family. This form of resistance culture was built upon raising awareness on confrontation through face-to-face interaction, street theaters, putting stickers all over the cities, writing, gathering, protests, and more. These initiations empowered women, turning the suppressed subjectivity that the state has been trying to push up in women since the revolution into active subjectivities, and in many cases to rebel subjectivities backed by communal struggle. One hidden aspect of the 1 million signature campaign that was essential in pushing limitations of those of thought on issues was the numerous meetings, including general committee and emergency meetings, which took place in people's homes. For hours, members would discuss issues, provide insights, and decide on action plan. These long meetings were necessary not just as a space to discuss the problem and strategize, but as a space that belonged to us, as a community that chose to be together to resist and relate together in struggle. Similar to the other communities, it was not always a smooth relationship. Part of the praxis included interpersonal or group dynamics that created issues, divisions, and discussions, especially around power relations between the center and peripheral regions, different strategies and views, and whose issues were being better amplified. For example, Kurdish members had different urgent matters than those in the northern region of Iran and the feminists in Tehran, who were the dominant group. Queer identity and homophobia were not discussed, even in unofficial ways. However, rainbow pins with the campaign logo on it were snuck into the movement and became very popular. Other matters arose regarding the organizational format. The question was whether the campaign should change its strategy and create more autonomous group or remaining its semi-central structure. I explain this because these are the lessons of how resilient feminist movement can be and build out of ruins of war and oppression. But also now stories come out of Iran that communities have already created mutual aid kind of like groups to take care of elderly, sick children, make sure people have access to food. So these communal spaces becomes very, very important, and we value the politics in that. However, I want to also talk about the Ahmadinejad and why it's important, because Ahmadinejad was the force who shifted Iran's economy. He cut the subsidies and imposed form of neoliberalization of economy, not exactly correct term, because it was more than 50% of the major formerly national economic centers became under the SEPA or IRG, which is the ideological arm of the army in Iran. Iran has two armies. One is regular army, one is SEPA, which is ideological army. And they took over all these formerly nationalized economic center. And why is that important? Because after that, Iranian money started losing its value in comparison to dollar because of this opening up of the economy and taking those restricting measures that would give back most of the income of oil and such kind of like commodities back to the people. And that gave extreme power to this army section, SEPA, to then spend that money as they wish. Well, obviously on the arms, on nuclear power, and on expanding their reach outside. Well, we know about the paramilitary kind of like forces in Iraq, who also recently killed a famous Iraqi communist feminist, Yanar Mohammed, who went back to Iraq only a few days before. Happened last week, fortunately, was killed by these paramilitaries. And a huge information campaign for, especially in Latin America and US, to kind of like gain support of the campists that we now see. The so-called anti-imperialist leftists who become very pro-authoritarian regime, and they completely erase the resistance from the ground. They completely undermine kind of like any form of social movement or kind of like resistance that's coming. And it's not just us in Iran who are having issues with them. Even indigenous movements in Latin America and all over Americas are being erased by their views, because it's all about state and state power and who is have the power to oppose major states. And for example, this shift in the economy gave enough money and power to the Iranian government to expand the 24-hour, 7-day, for example, channels in Spanish and so on, to kind of like expand their propaganda, and many leftists liked this regime, while if they were leftists in Iran, they probably would have ended up in prison themselves. So this is a part of like the complicated situation that we are facing right now. Going back to the campaign era, which is Ahmadinejad's era, after many arrests and eventually during the political crackdown on social movement during the 2009 uprising, the women's movement was forced to engage in more underground activities. Discussions and meetings through trusted groups of friends and activists rather than open calls were happening in homes. Some public appearances would happen in the form of articles, publications, and participation in more general demonstrations, rather than calling for one themselves. This was the essence of those times. Involvement in feminist writing, performance art, and events provided a path to rewrite and emphasize women's history that the mainstream and official writings would erase, ignore, and distort. Underground publishing of feminist books inside Iran, campaign zines, and websites continued even when they were deemed illegal. However, they were distributed through campaign workshops, gatherings, and the books were sold in bookstores whose owners were allies of the feminist movement. Many of the campaign organizers also left Iran. Those who got arrested or had open files with possible persecutions became exiles, and many, despite persecutions, stayed. More than a decade later, the Xinjiang Azadi Revolution started in September 2022. After Jina Amini, a young Kurdish woman, was arrested in Tehran for not wearing a proper hijab, whatever that means, and was beaten. Later that day, she died in custody. Her death sparked long-lasting uprising with millions of people pouring into the streets of many cities in Iran while chanting "Woman, Life, Freedom." The Xinjiang Azadi Revolution took the solidarity and consciousness about issues to another level. Kurdish and Baluchi women, to some extent, became leading voices within the feminist movement. There are multiple reasons for it, including Jina Amini was Kurdish, and her uncle wrote Xinjiang Azadi on her gravestone and said, "Jina, you are not dead. Your name will become a symbol of resistance." Xinjiang Azadi slogan itself comes from the long history of Kurdish resistance and women equality within it. During the uprising in Sistan and Baluchistan, government covered the case of high-ranked police officers' rape of a Baluchi teenage girl. Women staged demonstrations and for the first time got national coverage, not by official media, but through social media and alternative media. There were few other events that put Baluchi's women's, and especially women's struggle and resistance against the regime, but also against local conservative culture under spotlight, and finally broke the cliche of Baluchi women as very religious and conservative, and showed the independent active struggle that was going on for years, but never got coverage and attention. Many feminists call Xinjiang Azadi a revolution because it changed many social and political processes, relations, consciousness, and public politics around them. That the changes are undeniable. 10 years earlier, none of us in feminist movement thought that millions of people from all over the country would come to the streets and show unprecedented solidarity for women's rights and voices, as well as marginalized ethnic issues at a scale that has never been seen before. The mass-scale demonstration and uprising aspect of Women, Life, Freedom ended in spring 2023. Again, many people got arrested, many people got killed. But inside Iran, the movement turned to mass refusal. It is now normal to walk on the streets without a hijab. Women claim power and autonomy over their bodies. Of course, the battle continues and harassment by state forces happen in different ways, but mass refusal as a form of civil disobedience and a form of being is strong. During the Xinjiang Azadi Revolution, many of the 1 million signature campaign feminists living all around the world came together. Soon, many new friends joined, and an international feminist network called Feminist for Gina, still active today, was created. Trust in each other and the political community that was built in the 2000s enabled the network to quickly regroup. The relationship inside this group involves the shared identity of exile or immigrant, navigating the West, as well as the distance and constant shift in everyone's positionalities. This relationship ground the understanding of Iranian society, politics, and people in a dynamic connection to ongoing shifts in culture, social identities, and class. Such understanding or consciousness is necessary so memories do not become disconnected from the flow of history, slowly painting a fetishized and solidified picture of the past. Part of understanding of shifting conditions is that government is still the same, but its power bases are different, as are people and communities, forms of resistance to it. Understanding the dynamic relationship is essential, as that was one of the main qualities of the campaign as a participatory democratic space that anybody who wanted change and discriminatory laws could join. Many of us had to challenge our limited understanding of society and constantly confront our assumptions and prejudices. However, the movement also became popular. Popular movement, you probably also during that time saw many international solidarity with them. But the danger of that we failed to confront was to emptying the revolutionary concept behind Xinjiang Azadi and the radical feminist movement. Many right-wing kind of like also opposition try to co-opt Xinjiang Azadi movement through posing another kind of like slogan, which was man, homeland, yielding prosperity. And soon that was shut down. But what we see now in this current political situation is that feminists are seeing themselves back to the rock because these patriarchal voices are getting the ground in this in current situation. And kind of like the feminist movement is getting lots of criticism and attack as if we are not supporting this movement. While we are, and as I mentioned from the day one, the movement was. So these complexities are kind of like the situation that many are facing. I will just give a very final paragraph of my talk. Many of these gains that feminist movement made have been set back in 2026 as bloodshed, massacre, and bombs creates urgency that swallows life and movement building lives. What as feminists we are doing these days to not fall into despair is to amplifying stories of resistance of ordinary people that is coming out of Iran whenever they can connect or call in between communication blackouts by the regime. The story of neighborhood mutual aid and care groups that have been created to take care of elderly, sick, and children, to make sure people have food to eat, to do fundraising and create movement piggy banks that can be sent to those in need as there is no work. Some of us are helping with follow-up with prisoners, especially those who have been arbitrarily arrested in recent months, while following up with situation of political prisoners that the regime has kept as hostage in war situation. We also demand ceasefire now, and any discussion around conditions must include freedom of political prisoners and stop executions, while asking to, like, why we need open internet. Yes, we are dreaming for regime change too, but we are also sure the bombs will not provide freedom as they did not in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Syria, and Libya, and so on. But for sure brought total destruction of Gaza and now southern Lebanon. So I repeat, we refuse to choose between our murderers, the Islamic Republic of Iran, Israel, and the US.
Friends, we can now have your questions or comments if you like. So, do we have mic?
Yes, so you should come here so people online will see you too for the question period. So for people online, you can either raise your hand and then unmute yourself when we say your name, or you can write in the chat your question and I will read it. And for people here, we have a microphone here in the room, so they will hear your question, but please speak loud just to make sure, may need those at the back. So thank you. Thank you so much, Nilou. Did I hear it well? I heard you say that in the street of Tehran now, you can walk outside without hijab?
It was up to the war. I have no idea what's going on right now. But yes, after Zinjan Azadi, in not just Tehran, in many places, people could walk without hijab. Obviously, once in a while, there would be still some sort of morality police presence and try to intimidate. But after Zinjan Azadi, the government dismantled the official morality police and the checkpoints. Although, as I said, sometimes they would appear here and there, and shifted to fining people. So you would get financially kind of like scrutinized or threatening people to be kicked out of their jobs, etc. But in general public, you could go out without a job.
Yes.
Thank you so much for the very comprehensive overview of the feminist movements in Iran. And I've learned so much. I want to be optimistic, and at this time, right? So there's so many bad things happening in Iran, but what do you think are the opportunities for the feminists right now in Iran to grasp this moment? Maybe we can look at some good aspects or positive aspects of this negative things happening to the Iranian people right now.
A very hard question, as there's not means of communication. So it has been extremely hard to have a conversation with the colleagues in Iran. But what I can say is what I see most of the movement are emphasizing and putting their attention on the issue of political prisoners currently, because they are the most in danger, and kind of like that is the nature of the war and oppression. Whenever it happens, movements kind of like stop their usual activities and they focus on what is urgent. These are the urgent issues that we are facing currently.
Yes.
I was wondering like kind of like within
Can you
everyday,
speak up a bit?
sorry, within everyday life, what aspects of like expression or like the value to yourself and like how you want to look and how you want to feel are most like able to be maintained, protected, flourish, continue, and which ones you're the most thinking, oh, I feel a lot of risk for this, like I would say like knowledge or culture, like for example, music or literature, something like that, like something really rich that seems like it's really at risk.
During Janjian Azadi, the very rich music resistance, feminist music resistance culture came up. There were like very, very important songs that were made back then. But under current situation since January, facing the massacre and then bombs a few weeks after, the form of day-to-day expression have turned to sending out, documenting, and archiving the stories. That how people feel, how what happened. And many kind of like groups and journalists have turned to gathering those stories, which is very diverse. Those who are coming from Iran, they include from those who won the war because they see no out from this situation, and also fearing, as I said, the mass executions that might come. And from those who do not want war, and they also are fearing the same things, but they say, why should I die in this situation with a bomb falling on my head without resistance, without possibility of resistance? So, and then the daily life of, like, for example, the effect of the school, which was in a very rural kind of religious kind of like city. And the mothers of those children who were killed, 170, more than 170 of them, looks so different from the picture of the women, for example, that you see in major cities in Tehran, and how we can build solidarity in the diversity of these stories is what is important, and valuing those diversities without turning on each other in this situation is what is one of the main aspects and importance that I see mostly within feminist movement. We are trying to push for that diversity, to save that diversity of opinions, and to say that our kind of like solidarity within diversity is more important than the unity that are being presented to us in form of silencing every other words or kind of like stories that are coming to kind of like, and again, portrayed one savior as the kind of like very patriarchal attack and force a solution. So
we have questions in chats too. Let me read it.
Hold on. Nabia would like to ask the question herself, so she can unmute.
Okay.
Nabia, you can go ahead.
Hi everyone. It's nice to see you guys. Sorry, we're not here in person, unfortunately, with the weather, but the talks were very nice, and thank you for organizing this. So my question is about kind of the political future of Iran. I'm sorry if this is like too current to comment on, but if you like answer however you want. But I was wondering from the point of view of feminists and queers who are politically active in Iran, what is the best political outcome from that would come out of the current situation? I'm guessing it's not the Islamic regime. I'm guessing it's not, which, you know, might not change, unfortunately, according to what we're hearing currently. I'm guessing it's also not the Shah. Is there like a third option that is supported by, I don't know, leftist progressives? Is there a communist party somewhere that's gonna come and, like support popular, like represent the people? Yeah, are there other third political movements who are organized enough to take up space and kind of maybe offer the third solution in this impossible choice that you've been describing? And again, all my solidarity to the Iranian people. And yeah, it's a very difficult time right now. So thank you for speaking right now. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your question. The feminist movement have been building these democratic spaces, and we have never wanted to kind of like push forward of a main character. And so there have been many calls on people creating communal kind of like groups that they would discuss the politics at their communities and create solidarity among them. So yes, everybody wants this regime to be gone, but as you said, let's think about that best case scenario. If that happens, we want a coalition of representatives of different ethnic groups, different movements to be leading this, the outcome of the change. As you can see, in Kurdistan, there have been unprecedented kind of like coalition between different parties that usually do not agree with each other. There have been kind of like other forms of coalitions of different faces been created from inside Iran, from different political backgrounds, the democratic or what they call themselves, Jamhuri Khah, Republicans, democratic Republicans, from social democratic groups, there have been attempts of feminist groups to create coalitions too. But I don't want to talk about any specific group. I'm talking here about myself, but I know that many other people believe. And the same thing is that the best way to go is the coalition that can represent other groups. There's no one face, and there should not be one face that's gonna represent the next step. If we are talking about wishes, but yeah.
So I will have another question in chat. It's from Fiona. Fiona asks, she thanks you first of all.
I'm not sure. I think Fiona might want to unmute herself.
Fiona, do you
Yeah,
want to-
I can ask. Hi,
Okay,
Nilu. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for this great talk, Nilu. So informative. You already actually touched on this in your answer to the first response to the first question, but I'm wondering if you can elaborate on how these stories of resistance are circulating inside Iran and internationally in networks, and ways that we might elevate them as part of an international feminist solidarity politics. Like, how do we, how, given this landscape that you're describing and this campus versus like, kind of version of anti-imperialism and the feminist alternative analysis and approach to this, like, how do we intervene as supporting this struggle as part of our own?
Thank you for the question. The stories that are coming out is in between communication blackouts. Whenever anybody can connect, they write about how their daily life and kind of like their social relationships, the effect on environment. The pictures sometimes are also saying the story with a short message underneath. And as I said, many people have in diaspora have put their effort to archive those, amplify those, and expand it. But also there are many efforts happening right now within different groups that are being shaped beside the networks that already exist for people who do not support Islamic Republic, they do not support war, and they do not support monarchy. Because many of us have been intimidated, and especially in the past month or two, by all these three forces. And now we are rebuilding our grounds and kind of like to open up that other voice and alternative and kind of like movement that is happening. The issue with the campists is that they feed into the ultra right-wing narrative that is also coming up in diaspora, and we're having issues with that. And from one hand, they say, hey, look, they are agents of US and Israel. Look, they are like dancing and shouting, thank you, Trump, thank you, Netanyahu. So what Islamic Republic was saying is true, and they try to legitimize the mass killings of protesters through that narrative, which is very unfortunate. I have seen a few times happening. And on the other hand, many people who have joined this rise of right-wing politics in that special diaspora are not necessarily pro-monarchy. They see that as like, okay, this is a transitional period. We have to support this figure because we have never seen any other political possibility. And well, look, leftists are pro-regime. So what monarchists are saying is true, that leftists and Islamic Republic are hand in hand. So these two kind of like section or camps are feeding into each other and pushing the Iranian leftist feminists and those who have the position that I explained further and further back to the corner. And as I mentioned, there is a new attempt to create an anti-war movement that would include our messaging. And I'm sure there's so many more. So we are not just few people. As I talk to people, like, yes, we don't see an anti-war movement that we can join. As I mentioned, the mainstream anti-war movement, if we go there, we see Islamic Republic flag, we see Khamenei's picture, we want to get into fight. That's not gonna happen. That's not gonna go anywhere. That's why you don't see much Iranian crowds in those, even those who oppose this war. So what I think the left in Canada and other places can do is to push those people, most of them white folks, to complicate their position. So it's not a simple position. You cannot look at this government or regime as a resistance, introduce it as resistance to oppose US and Israel attack on Iran. If you do, you will stay small. You will kind of alienate Iranian population who live here and have been fighting both for years and years. And it also, you can see it in when news outlets here are interviewing people. It's either Islamic Republic agents that they interview, or these so-called non-Iranian experts who talks on Iran. And it happens over and over. And even within leftist publication, we are saying, why you don't interview an Iranian leftist? Why you kind of like exclude us? And it's going on. And I feel like part of the solidarity is that people start challenging kind of like left here to do the opposite of what they're doing right now. I hope.
Well, thank you for the excellent presentation. What do you think is the percentage of women who are political prisoners currently in Iran? What percent of women prisoners, political prisoners?
What percentage of women, of political prisoners are women?
Oh, a lot. It's the percentage of political prisoners in Iran has been growing, and percentage of women too. And since January, well, before there were 3 high-case female political prisoners who were sentenced to execution. 1 or 2 got, after loss of pressure, the sentence changed. But in recent weeks, the government is issuing lots of executions for even women political prisoners. That is unprecedented since 80s, unfortunately. And yeah.
I'm curious to hear more about like your background, because I know you lived part of your life, I think, in Iran. So like, how was that transition for you? Like, did you study in Iran? And then coming to Canada, how was that transition, and like kind of the movements that you were part of in Iran versus now, just kind of speaking about.
Yeah, I came to Canada when I was 24 years old. I finished my studies at Tehran University, came here and started at York University and studied politics and social and political thought. And the first few years I was part of, well, when I campaign was almost ending. But I was also active in Committee of Human Rights Reporters, which was a volunteer-based group. Bunch of us from different backgrounds. Me and another member from feminist movement, few from socialist movement, few from Baha'i minorities, and some who were working on, for example, street children. We all came together and created, like, we were working in that group to specifically cover the issues that political prisoners from different movements were facing inside prison. So in those years, I was a reporter for that group. And when 2009 uprising against Ahmadinejad happened, around 100 people got killed, half of them inside prison under torture. And we were one of the groups who were covering those because of working on prisoners' issues for years. We had connection with inside prison, and many people would trust us and send us the stories. So we were the ones who were covering those. And that was the period that the government went after all members of the group. Around 9 people got arrested. 2, 3 were hiding to get out of the country because they were more at risk. And me and another member at that point were already outside of Iran. And that was the point that I got serious charges and could not go back anymore. Our activities back then and the Committee of Human Rights Reporters ended in 2012. After the kind of like many prisoners started coming out of prison, or also because of the criminalization, I lost so much contact with inside. And then I shifted my focus on environmental movement here. It was almost during Xinjiang Azadi movement that I got connected again with my old friends and feminist movement and started my activism on Iran again with Feminist Argentina since then.
Maybe just could you expand a little bit more for those of us who don't know a lot about the Xinjiang Azadi movement?
The Xinjiang Azadi movement, as I mentioned, happened after Jina Amini was killed in custody because of not wearing proper hijab. And that was the point that people were like, enough is enough. We are done with this daily humiliation that hundreds of people every day, like many women in daily life, you go out in the street, you might get arrested because somebody who has that authority don't like how you look that day. So it was so arbitrary. It was like a constant kind of like policing of women's body and life that was going on, as I mentioned, since beginning of the revolution. So then Xinjiang Azadi, that, as I mentioned, the slogan comes from rich Kurdish women resistance, and have many rich political meanings behind it. For example, like it's not just like woman life freedom, but what kind of life? Life with dignity that we are asking. What kind of freedom? The freedom that comes with gender equality and life with dignity. These are very important aspects of, and this was our take on Xinjiang Azadi. Obviously, there's also lots of rich context and writings from the Kurdish women movements that is not limited to Iran. It's like from Turkey, Syria, and Iraq are part of that. And it was a moment in the history of Iran that is also, from my knowledge, is kind of rare in the world, that the whole country comes out and like shouts woman life freedom for the rights of women to be able to kind of like regain that dignity, freedom of choice, et cetera, that comes with it. So that is why Xinjiang Azadi is important. And there is a reason I say Xinjiang Azadi, not women life freedom, to stay kind of like connected to that radical history that comes behind it, instead of co-optation of very liberal feminists all around the world that use that slogan of woman life freedom without that radical context. So these are very conscious kind of like choice of words that the branch of feminist movement that I'm coming from have chosen to use it.
Thank you so much. We don't have, we can continue to chat on the break during the break, but we will have a 15-minute break and we'll come back with Geneviève Paget. I will install your PowerPoint. So thank you so much, Nilou.